The screaming wouldn't stop. Not loud crying, not irritated fussing. Screaming, the kind that made people flinch, the kind that made strangers look at each other with silent blame. The kind that crawled under the skin and stayed there. Derek Holloway pressed his palm against his son's tiny chest as if he could somehow absorb the pain out of him. Caleb, please. Daddy's here. I'm right here. But Caleb arched his back, fists clenched, face red and wet with tears. 8 months old, burning hot. Inconsolable, the private jet cabin felt smaller by the second. 2 investors across from Derek exchanged a tight glance. His chief of operations stared down at his tablet like he wasn't hearing anything. The pilot's voice crackled faintly from the cockpit, asking if everything was under control. It wasn't. Nothing about this was under control. Derek Holloway, founder of a $12 billion biomedical tech empire, man who negotiated billion-dollar contracts without blinking, could not calm his own son. Maybe he's teething, one of the investors muttered. He's not teething, Derek snapped, then immediately regretted it. He tried the bottle. Caleb screamed harder. He tried rocking him. The screams rose. He tried white noise from his phone. Nothing. They were halfway across the Atlantic, flying from New York to Zurich for the most important merger meeting of Derek's career. A deal that would redefine pediatric neurological research worldwide. And his son wouldn't stop screaming. Derek's throat tightened. Since Claire passed during childbirth complications, Caleb had been his entire world. Every board meeting, every press conference, every sleepless night. He was all Derek had left. And right now, Derek felt like he was failing him. Suddenly, the cabin door behind the galley opened. The flight attendant leaned in nervously. "Mr. Holloway, there's someone from the support crew section asking if they can speak with you." Derek blinked. "Support crew?" "Yes, sir, one of the medical transport assistants hitching a ride to Zurich. He said he might know what's happening." One investor scoffed softly. "Is this really the time for—" "Send him," Derek said immediately. The attendant nodded and stepped aside. A thin teenage boy stepped into the cabin, 17, maybe 18, oversized hoodie, worn sneakers, nervous posture. Dark circles under his eyes like sleep had been optional for years. He didn't belong in this cabin of tailored suits and leather seats. Derek stared at him. "You said you know what's wrong with my son?" The boy nodded slowly. His voice was steady. His cry changed after the first 10 minutes. Derek frowned. "What?" "It's not pain from the stomach," the boy continued. "It's neurological overstimulation. The pitch shifts every 12 seconds. That's not colic. That's pressure in the cranial nerve." Silence fell across the cabin. The investors stopped breathing. Derek felt something twist in his chest. "And how," Derek said carefully, "would you know that?" The boy stepped closer, eyes soft but focused. "My sister has cortical hypersensitivity disorder. I've tracked her episodes for 3 years. Caleb's pattern matches the early stages." Derek's jaw tightened. "You're diagnosing my son?" "No," the boy said quietly. "I'm recognizing what I've already lived." Caleb screamed again, sharper now. The boy winced. "He needs compression behind the occipital ridge, very gentle, and the cabin pressure is amplifying it." Derek swallowed. "What's your name?" "Micah." "Micah what?" "Micah Reyes." Derek hesitated only half a second before handing Caleb over. The entire cabin froze. One investor whispered, "Derek, this is reckless." Derek didn't look at him. Micah held Caleb with surprising confidence. He adjusted the baby's position slightly, one hand supporting the neck, 2 fingers pressing softly at the base of the skull. Caleb's screams continued. Micah leaned close to the baby's ear. "It's okay, little man. I know it feels loud in there. I know it feels like the world is pressing in." His voice wasn't soothing. It was understanding. He began humming, not a lullaby, not a song, but a low rhythmic tone. Derek watched Caleb's fists unclench. The screaming dropped to sharp cries, then softer, then hiccuping sobs. Then silence, the kind of silence that feels like oxygen returning to a room. Caleb blinked. Micah adjusted his fingers slightly, maintaining the pressure. "Hold him like this for 20 minutes, Micah instructed. "Don't let the cabin temperature fluctuate." Derek stared. The investors stared. The entire world seemed to pause. Caleb was asleep. Derek felt his knees almost give. How did you? Micah shrugged slightly. I listen. Derek's voice cracked. Who are you? Micah hesitated. I'm flying to Zurich for the European NeuroQuant Challenge. One investor sat up. That competition is invite only. Micah nodded. They made an exception. Derek narrowed his eyes. Why? Because I built a predictive model for pediatric neural response spikes using public hospital data. The investor blinked. That data is encrypted. Micah met his gaze calmly. Not all of it. Silence. Derek felt something bigger than surprise rising in him. How old are you? He asked. 17. Where are you from? East Baltimore. One of the investors whispered, You're kidding. Micah ignored him. Derek leaned forward. Why are you on a support crew flight? Micah's jaw tightened slightly. Because I couldn't afford commercial. Derek stared at him. Who's funding your trip? My community center and my mother's church. His voice did not carry shame. It carried pride. The plane felt different now, like the air itself had shifted. Derek looked at his sleeping son, then back at Micah. You said you tracked your sister's episodes for 3 years. Micah nodded. She was misdiagnosed twice. They kept calling it behavioral instability. I built a neural spike frequency monitor from discarded EEG components. The investor let out a short breath. That's impossible. Micah looked at him evenly. Not if you don't know it's supposed to be. Derek felt something awaken inside him. Not admiration, recognition. He saw himself at 17, scraping together scholarships, being underestimated, being told what was impossible. But Micah had something Derek hadn't had. Compassion. Derek spoke carefully. What would have happened if you hadn't intervened? Micah didn't hesitate. He would have had a seizure within the hour. The words landed like thunder. The cabin went cold. Derek's hands trembled slightly. You're sure? Micah nodded. The pitch was climbing. Derek leaned back slowly. The CEO, the billionaire, the man who funded pediatric neuro research foundations, had missed it. Micah shifted slightly. I should go back. They don't like us staying in this section. Derek's voice sharpened. Who doesn't? Micah didn't answer. He handed Caleb back gently. Derek held his son differently now, like he understood something he hadn't before. Sit down, Derek said. Micah hesitated. That wasn't a request. Micah slowly sat across from him. The investors looked uncomfortable. Derek didn't care. What's your project for the competition? Micah met his eyes. A neural stress adaptation algorithm for infants in high-stimulation environments. Derek exhaled slowly. Of course it is. Micah tilted his head. Derek leaned forward. Micah, if you win this competition, what happens? Micah's answer was immediate. My sister gets proper treatment. And if you don't? Micah looked down briefly. I go home. The plane hummed steadily over the Atlantic. Derek studied him carefully. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't luck. This was collision. And something inside Derek told him this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. If this opening pulled you in already, imagine what happens when Zurich changes everything. But before we continue, if you love emotional, cinematic stories about unexpected connections and life-altering moments, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and comment where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need them. Because what happens next? No one on that plane was prepared for, and Zurich was only the start. The plane landed in Zurich under a sky that looked too calm for what was coming. Micah stepped off the aircraft with a single worn backpack slung over one shoulder. No entourage, no sponsors in suits. No press waiting with cameras. Derek stepped off behind him, holding Caleb carefully against his chest. Investors flanked him again. Authority returned to his posture, but something had shifted in his eyes. Inside the private terminal, a tall woman in a navy blazer approached Derek. Mr. Holloway, the press conference is in 40 minutes. The NeuroGen merger representatives are already... Derek lifted a hand. Reschedule. The woman froze. Sir? Reschedule. He looked toward Micah, who was staring at the massive glass ceiling like he wasn't sure he was allowed to look up that long. "And prepare a credential badge for him." The woman blinked. "For who?" "For him." Micah turned slightly. "I don't need—" "Yes," Derek said quietly. "You do." Micah hesitated, pride and practicality wrestling in his eyes. "Fine," he said softly, "but I'm not charity." Derek's voice dropped. "I don't do charity. I do investment." Micah held his gaze. That was the first unspoken agreement. The competition hall the next morning was massive. Screens, flags, judges from 12 countries. Hundreds of participants in sharp suits and tailored confidence. Micah stood in line wearing the same hoodie. A boy behind him muttered, "Did they open this to public schools now?" Micah didn't react. Another competitor glanced at his badge. "Baltimore Community STEM Initiative." Micah nodded. The boy smirked. "Bold." Micah's voice stayed even, so his breathing. Inside the main auditorium, the announcer's voice echoed. "Welcome to the European NeuroQuant Challenge. This year's problem sets focus on real-time pediatric neurological response modeling and AI-driven predictive stabilization systems." Derek sat in the front VIP section, Caleb asleep beside him with a hired pediatric specialist now monitoring him closely. The specialist had reviewed Caleb's overnight readings. "You were lucky," she told Derek quietly. "Very lucky." Derek didn't respond. He wasn't thinking about luck. He was thinking about Micah sitting alone 3 rows back from the stage. Round 1 began. Individual modeling. Participants were given a live stream of simulated neural data from infants exposed to varying environmental stimuli. They had 90 minutes to build a stabilization response model. Micah's fingers moved across the borrowed laptop with calm precision. Across the room, polished competitors whispered formulas, scribbled equations, recalibrated code. Micah closed his eyes for 3 seconds. Then he started deleting lines. He rebuilt from scratch. Derek noticed. 40 minutes in, one of the top-ranked competitors slammed his keyboard softly. "This dataset is flawed," he muttered. Micah kept typing. 70 minutes in, judges began walking around. One paused behind Micah. His eyebrows lifted. He leaned closer. "What are you doing?" the judge asked quietly. Micah didn't look up. "Removing predictive bias." The judge narrowed his eyes. "Explain." "Your dataset assumes uniform neurological baseline across demographics." "That's inaccurate." The judge's voice tightened. "It's standardized for competition purposes." Micah nodded. "Which makes it wrong." A few nearby competitors glanced over. The judge folded his arms. "So you're correcting our data?" Micah finally looked up. "I'm correcting your assumption." The judge walked away without comment. Derek felt his pulse rise. Was this bravery or self-sabotage? When time was called, models were submitted. Screens lit up. Live simulations began running. Competitor models stabilized infant neural spikes within an average of 12.4 seconds. Micah's model triggered. The spike rose, then dropped, stabilized in 6.8 seconds. Murmurs rippled across the hall. One competitor leaned forward sharply. "That's not possible." The judge, who had questioned Micah earlier, stared at the screen. Micah didn't smile. He just exhaled slowly. Round 1 standings flashed. Micah Reyes, rank 2. Rank 1 was held by a heavily sponsored Swiss competitor. Micah nodded once, then the team round was announced. Participants were grouped randomly. Micah walked toward his assigned table. 3 other competitors were already seated. A tall German girl with sharp eyes, a French data scientist's son, and the Swiss rank 1. The Swiss competitor leaned back. "So you're the anomaly." Micah shrugged. "I prefer result." The German girl cut in. "Let's focus. The problem?" The team challenge involved modeling neurological spread in pediatric viral infections under high-density urban conditions. Micah's fingers tapped lightly on the table. He spoke carefully. "You're all modeling containment." The French competitor nodded. "Of course." Micah shook his head. "You can't contain it first. You reduce amplification nodes." The Swiss competitor scoffed. "That's inefficient." Micah leaned forward. "No, it's realistic." Tension filled the table. Derek watched from across the hall. This wasn't just intelligence, this was confrontation. The Swiss competitor folded his arms. Prove it. Micah grabbed the stylus and began sketching a rapid network map. Urban pediatric networks aren't evenly distributed. Daycares, transit clusters, apartment density. You isolate amplification hubs first, not total population. The German girl's eyes widened slightly. That reduces spread velocity by 42%, Micah finished. Silence. The French competitor looked at the screen. He's right. The Swiss competitor's jaw tightened. Fine, we test it. They coded, the simulation ran, spread velocity dropped by 39.8%. The Swiss competitor stared at the numbers. Micah didn't celebrate, he just leaned back. Your turn, he said calmly. Respect shifted subtly at that table. After the second round, standings updated. Micah Reyes. Rank 1. Derek felt something tighten in his chest. Not pride, fear. Because success changes things, and not everyone welcomes change. As the break began, a man in a dark suit approached Micah. You're Reyes. Micah nodded. I represent Neurogen Europe. We noticed your file flagged. Micah's eyes narrowed slightly. Flagged? Your predictive model from Baltimore accessed partial hospital archives. Micah's posture stiffened. I accessed public endpoints. The man's smile was thin. That's debatable. Derek stood up from the VIP section immediately. He walked down the aisle with calm authority. Is there a problem? The man turned. Mr. Holloway. Derek's tone was ice. Is there a problem? The man adjusted his cuff. We're reviewing eligibility compliance. Derek stepped slightly closer to Micah. He's eligible. The man's eyes flickered between them. Your company is currently negotiating a merger with ours. Derek didn't blink. And? It would be unfortunate if complications arose. Micah felt the temperature drop. This wasn't about rules, this was about leverage. Derek's voice lowered. Are you threatening a 17-year-old? The man smiled faintly. Of course not. He stepped back. We'll review after final round. He walked away. Micah's jaw clenched. I didn't break any laws. Derek looked at him carefully. I know. Micah swallowed. They'll disqualify me. Derek shook his head. Not today. Micah met his eyes. Why are you doing this? Derek's answer was quiet. Because someone should have done it for me. The final round was announced. Live stage, individual, real-time crisis simulation. No code prepared in advance, pure modeling under pressure. The dataset loaded, sudden spike, unstable pattern, system failure countdown visible on giant screens. Competitors began typing frantically. Micah stared at the numbers. Something felt wrong. The spike pattern wasn't random. It was structured, artificial. He raised his hand. The judge looked annoyed. Yes, this dataset is corrupted. Murmurs. The judge frowned. It's live feed. Micah shook his head. No, it's seeded interference. The countdown continued. Other competitors ignored him. Micah made a decision. He didn't fix the spike. He rewrote the system detection layer. Gasps rose from the audience. The Swiss competitor whispered sharply, You're wasting time. Micah didn't respond. The countdown hit 15 seconds. Micah hit run. The system paused, detected anomaly, isolated artificial seed, recalibrated, stabilized. The clock stopped. Silence. Then applause. Slow at first, then swelling. The judges stood. Rankings flashed. Micah Reyes, winner. The hall erupted, but in the VIP section, the Neurogen representative was already on his phone. Derek saw it. Victory had just made this bigger and more dangerous. Micah stood on stage holding the trophy. He looked stunned. He looked proud. He looked like someone who had fought his entire life quietly and finally been seen. If you're feeling this moment right now, if you believe hidden talent deserves real opportunity, take a second and hit like, subscribe and comment opportunity below. Because stories like this remind us what's possible when someone refuses to stay silent. But this story wasn't over, not even close, because when power feels threatened, it doesn't disappear. It retaliates. And before the night was over, Micah's victory would trigger something no one in that hall expected. The applause hadn't even fully faded before the headlines began forming. Underdog wins NeuroQuant. Baltimore teen outsmarts Europe's best. Unknown competitor rewrites final round algorithm. Micah stood on stage, trophy in hand, blinking under the lights as cameras flashed. He looked smaller up there than he had during the competition, like the weight of visibility had suddenly landed on his shoulders. In the front row, Derek didn't clap immediately. He was watching the Neurogen representative whispering sharply into his phone. And then Derek's own phone vibrated. He looked down. 3 missed calls from his board chair, 2 texts from his chief legal officer, 1 message from an unknown number. He opened that one. If the boy speaks about data access publicly, the merger is dead. Derek's jaw tightened. Micah stepped off stage and was immediately surrounded by press. How did you solve the seeded interference? Who trained you? Which university are you committed to? Micah blinked at the microphones. No one trained me, he said quietly. I trained myself. A reporter leaned forward. Did you hack hospital systems to build your model? Micah froze. The question cut through everything. The cameras zoomed closer. His throat tightened slightly. I accessed public data endpoints. But hospital archives are not public. I never accessed private patient information. Did you bypass encryption? Micah's heart started pounding. This wasn't celebration. This was interrogation. Derek moved fast. He stepped into the circle of reporters. That's enough. The microphones shifted toward him. Mr. Holloway, is it true your company had prior contact with Mr. Reyes? Derek didn't blink. My company had prior contact because he saved my son's life. Silence dropped. Reporters glanced at each other. Derek's voice stayed level. My son experienced a neurological spike mid-flight. None of us recognized it. Micah did. Cameras shifted toward Micah again. He prevented a seizure. The air changed. Reporters recalibrated. So you're endorsing him? I'm stating a fact. The Neurogen representative approached from behind. Mr. Holloway, a word. Derek turned slowly. Now. Micah watched as Derek stepped aside with the man. The representative's voice was low but sharp. You're tying yourself to him publicly. Derek's expression didn't move. He earned that stage. You have a fiduciary responsibility. I have a moral one too. The representative's jaw tightened. You don't know what doors he opened to build that model. Derek leaned in slightly. Then prove it. The man hesitated. We're conducting an internal review. Derek's eyes hardened. Conduct it quietly. The man's voice dropped to a whisper. If this becomes a scandal, the merger collapses. $12 billion. Derek didn't look away. And your shareholders revolt. Derek's mind flashed to the board, the press, the stock dip that would follow controversy. And then he pictured Caleb's face mid-flight. Red, gasping, on the edge of something worse. He straightened. If my company can't survive supporting a 17-year-old who won fair and square, then maybe it deserves to collapse. The representative stepped back. You're making a mistake. Derek's voice was calm. Maybe, but it won't be because I stayed silent. He walked back toward Micah. Micah was standing alone now. The press had moved on to file stories. Are they going to disqualify me? Micah asked quietly. No. Are they going to try? Yes. Micah swallowed. I didn't do anything illegal. Derek nodded. I know. Micah looked down at the trophy in his hands. I just needed the data to be accurate. Derek studied him. You don't regret it? Micah's eyes lifted. Regret what? Challenging them. Correcting the judges, calling out the data set. Micah's voice was steady. If something's wrong, it's wrong. No hesitation, no fear in the statement, just conviction. Derek felt something shift permanently in him. That night, the gala dinner was supposed to celebrate innovation, crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, quiet classical music. Micah stood near the edge of the room in borrowed formal wear provided by the event organizers. It didn't quite fit. He tugged at the collar slightly. A group of competitors passed him. One of them muttered just loud enough to hear, "Enjoy it while it lasts." Micah didn't respond. Across the room, Derek was cornered by two board members who had flown in late. "This is escalating," one said sharply, neurogens threatening to pull out. "On what grounds?" Derek asked calmly. "Security concerns." Derek almost laughed. "He's 17. He embarrassed them. That's not a crime." The second board member leaned closer. "Publicly supporting him ties our company to potential liability." Derek's voice lowered. "Our company builds pediatric neural stabilization tools. A kid builds one better than us, and you want to distance." "It's optics. It's fear." The board member's eyes narrowed. "You're risking billions." Derek's tone sharpened slightly. "Billions built on what? Innovation." Silence, then innovate. Micah felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned. The German girl from his team round stood there. "You were right about the amplification nodes." Micah nodded once. "They're always the problem." She studied him carefully. "They're reviewing your eligibility." "I know." "Do you have representation?" Micah blinked. "Representation?" "Legal." He shook his head. She exhaled. "You should." Across the room, the neurogen representative stepped onto the stage unexpectedly. He tapped the microphone. "May I have everyone's attention?" The room quieted. Micah's pulse quickened. The man smiled tightly. "While we celebrate today's remarkable performances, it has come to our attention that certain datasets used in preparation for this competition may have been obtained through unauthorized digital access." The room shifted. Derek stood slowly. The representative continued, "We are launching an immediate review into the eligibility of the current first-place holder." Murmurs erupted. Micah's throat went dry. He didn't look at Derek. He stared straight ahead. The representative finished smoothly. "Pending review, prize distribution will be temporarily withheld." The word withheld echoed. The room buzzed. One competitor whispered, "Knew it." Micah felt heat rise behind his eyes, not tears, anger. Derek stepped forward. "On what evidence?" The representative met his gaze. "Digital footprint inconsistencies." "That's vague." "It's ongoing." Derek's voice carried now. "You're accusing him publicly." "We're reviewing." "You're withholding his prize." "It's procedural." Micah finally spoke. His voice was quiet but clear. "I'll open my system." The room stilled. The representative blinked. "You'll what?" "I'll open my entire model build. Every line, every source." Derek turned sharply. "Micah!" Micah didn't look at him. "I have nothing to hide." The representative hesitated. Public refusal would look suspicious. Public acceptance was risky. The German girl stepped forward. "I'll audit." The French competitor joined her. "Me too." The Swiss competitor paused, then nodded once. "Fine." The representative's jaw tightened. "Very well, we'll convene immediately." The ballroom transformed into a courtroom. Laptops opened, screens projected. Micah connected his system. His hands were steady, but inside his heart was racing. He opened folder after folder. Code scrolled across the screen. Timestamp logs, public endpoint citations, access paths. The German girl leaned in. "These are municipal health data sets." Micah nodded. "Open access." The French competitor scanned deeper. He scrubbed identifiers. The Swiss competitor studied the encryption layers. "This is clean." The representative shifted uncomfortably. "Continue." Micah opened the neural spike predictor model. Version history appeared. Months of incremental builds, time-stamped late-night edits, notes labeled Maya Episode 3, Maya Episode 14. Derek saw it. His chest tightened. Micah had built this out of love. The German girl looked up. "There's no breach." The French competitor nodded. "No unauthorized access." The Swiss competitor leaned back slowly. He reverse-engineered public noise filters. The representative's composure cracked slightly. "That's unconventional." Micah's voice was soft. "Not illegal." Silence. The room watched the neurogen representative carefully. He cleared his throat. "It appears there may have been a misunderstanding." A few quiet laughs rippled. Derek didn't smile. "Announce it." The representative forced a tight smile. "Upon review, Mr. Reyes is fully compliant and his victory stands." Applause exploded. But it felt different now. It wasn't polite, it was protective. Micah exhaled slowly. He hadn't realized how hard he'd been bracing himself. Derek stepped closer. You didn't need to do that alone. Micah looked at him finally. I'm used to it. Derek held his gaze. You shouldn't be. If you've ever had to defend your integrity just to be allowed to stand in a room, you understand this moment. And if you believe talent shouldn't have to fight twice as hard just to be seen, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Stand firm below. Because this story is about more than winning. It's about refusing to shrink. But the fallout wasn't finished. Because public humiliation leaves scars, and powerful people don't forget being embarrassed. The next morning, Derek woke to headlines. Merger talk suspended. Holloway sides with teen against corporate partner. Neurogen pulls out of $12 billion deal. His phone buzzed relentlessly. Stock dipped 8% at opening bell. Board emergency meeting scheduled. Derek stood at the hotel window staring at the Zurich skyline. Micah knocked lightly on the suite door. I saw the news, he said quietly. Derek didn't turn immediately. It's fine. It's not. Derek finally faced him. Do you regret it? Micah shook his head slowly. No. Good. Micah hesitated. You could have stayed quiet. Yes. Why didn't you? Derek's voice was calm. Because you didn't. Micah felt something settle in his chest. Not relief. Alliance. But neither of them knew yet that the real test wasn't public scandal. It was what came next. Because when billions disappear overnight, boards demand sacrifice, and someone was about to suggest exactly who that sacrifice should be. Derek had faced hostile takeovers before. He had faced aggressive investors, collapsing markets, lawsuits, media storms. But walking into that emergency board meeting felt different. Because this time, it wasn't about numbers. It was about a person. The boardroom screen lit up with faces from New York, London, Singapore. Tension was visible in every square. Let's begin, the chair said sharply. You've cost us $12 billion. Derek sat down calmly. No. Neurogen pulled out. Because you publicly defended a competitor who humiliated them. Because they attempted to disqualify a 17-year-old unfairly. That's not our problem. Derek's jaw tightened. It became our problem when they made it one. A board member leaned forward. The stock dropped 9% in 48 hours. It will recover. Not if investors think you're unstable. Silence. Unstable. Derek let that word hang in the air. Unstable, he repeated quietly. For defending integrity. For making emotional decisions. Derek's voice sharpened slightly. You think this was emotional? Yes. It was strategic. Several members exchanged looks. Explain. Derek leaned forward. We build pediatric neural stabilization systems. A teenager from Baltimore just outperformed Europe's top institutions using public data and lived experience. The world watched him defend his work under pressure. And you think distancing ourselves is smart? The chair folded his hands. You're suggesting what? I'm suggesting we hire him. The room erupted. He's 17. He's controversial. He's a liability. Derek didn't raise his voice. He's brilliant. And unpolished. Good. Silence again. The chair's voice lowered. Even if we consider that, optics matter. Investors want stability. Derek held their gaze. Investors want innovation, and they want leadership that doesn't collapse under pressure. A pause. Are you willing, the chair said carefully, to stake your position on this? The question settled heavily. Outside the suite, Micah sat in the hallway, staring at the patterned carpet. He wasn't supposed to hear anything, but the door wasn't fully sealed. He heard raised voices. He heard the word liability. He heard his name. His chest tightened. He stood slowly. He knocked once. The room inside went quiet. Derek opened the door halfway. Micah looked up at him. You should do it. Do what? Distance. Derek's eyes hardened slightly. Who told you that? No one had to. Derek stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. Micah's voice was calm but strained. I don't want to cost you everything. Derek studied him. You didn't cost me anything. Yes, I did. No. Micah swallowed. I'm used to fighting alone. Derek's voice softened. You shouldn't be. Micah's eyes flickered. My sister needs treatment. If this blows up more, that disappears. Derek stepped closer. Look at me. Micah did. You didn't ask me to step in. No. You didn't ask them to attack you. No. You stood your ground because it was right. Micah's jaw tightened slightly. Right doesn't always win. Derek's voice lowered. It does when someone refuses to back down. Inside the boardroom, voices rose again. The chair called out, Derek, we need you. He looked at Micah. Stay. Micah nodded slowly. Derek walked back inside. He sat down. You asked if I'd stake my position. The board leaned forward. Yes. Derek's voice was steady. I will. Silence fell. If you want me to step down, vote. The chair inhaled slowly. That's extreme. No, it's clear. Another board member spoke cautiously. If you're wrong, we absorb massive losses. If I'm right, Derek replied, we redefine the company. The screen flickered as votes were cast digitally. 1 by 1, 5 against him, 4 for him, 1 undecided. All eyes shifted to the final square. The undecided member, an older woman who rarely spoke, leaned forward. You believe in this boy? Yes. You believe he represents what we claim to stand for? Yes. And you believe investors will eventually see that? Yes. She nodded slowly. I've seen markets punish fear before. A pause. But I've also seen them reward courage. Her vote registered. For Derek. The tally shifted. 5 for him. 5 against. Tie. The chair exhaled sharply. As chair, I break the tie. The room held its breath. He looked directly into the camera. You have 90 days. Derek didn't blink. 90 days to prove this wasn't a reckless decision. Understood. If the stock doesn't stabilize, if investors withdraw further, we reconsider your position. Derek nodded. Understood. The call ended. Silence filled the room. Derek exhaled slowly. 90 days. Outside, Micah stood as Derek opened the door. What happened? Micah asked quietly. Derek looked at him. We have 90 days. For what? To change everything. Micah blinked. What does that mean? It means you're coming home with me. Weeks later, Baltimore felt very different. Not because the streets changed, but because cameras were waiting. Word had spread. Holloway partners with Baltimore teen genius. Some headlines were supportive, some were skeptical. Micah stepped out of the car slowly. His mother stood at the doorway of their apartment building, eyes wide. You didn't tell me television would be here, she whispered. Micah shrugged slightly. I didn't know. Derek approached respectfully. Mom. She studied him carefully. You're the man from the news. Yes. She folded her arms slightly. My son didn't steal anything. I know. She softened slightly. You really believe in him? Yes. She looked at Micah. Then don't let him forget who he is. Derek nodded. I won't. Within weeks, Derek announced a new division inside his company, Urban Neural Systems Initiative, focused on pediatric neurological modeling in underserved communities. Micah wasn't an employee. He was named Junior Research Fellow. Headlines shifted. Billionaire CEO doubles down. Stock dipped again. Then something unexpected happened. Hospitals reached out. Non-profits reached out. Public school districts requested partnerships. Parents wrote letters. Investors noticed. One analyst said on television, this might be risky short-term, but long-term, it's visionary. The stock stabilized, then began climbing. In the lab, Micah stood in front of a digital neural map. Derek watched from the doorway. You see it? Micah asked. See what? The gap. Explain. Micah zoomed in on a cluster. Low-income zip codes show delayed spike response detection. Because? Because equipment is outdated. Derek nodded slowly. So what do we build? Micah turned. Portable, low-cost neural monitors. Derek smiled slightly. Good. Micah hesitated. What? You don't treat me like a kid. Derek's expression softened. You're not one. Months passed, 90 days approached. Board review day arrived. Derek stood in the same boardroom. This time, stock graphs showed steady recovery. Urban Neural Systems Initiative had secured 3 state contracts. Press coverage had shifted tone. The chair spoke first. "Explain the turnaround." Derek nodded toward the screen. Micah's presentation began. He wasn't in the room physically. He stood in Baltimore, live-streamed. Calm, composed. "We reduced pediatric spike detection delay by 31% in 3 districts," Micah said. Board members watched carefully. "We did it using cost-effective hardware and adaptive modeling." One board member leaned forward. "And this is scalable?" "Yes." "Nationally?" "Yes." Silence. The chair leaned back. "Stock has recovered and surpassed pre-merger projections." Derek said nothing. The older woman smiled faintly. "Seems courage pays." The chair cleared his throat. Motion to confirm CEO position without restriction. Votes cast. Unanimous. Meeting adjourned. Later that night, Derek stood alone on the balcony of his New York apartment, Caleb asleep inside. Micah joined him quietly. "You didn't tell me the vote," Micah said. Derek looked at him. "It passed." Micah exhaled slowly. "You almost lost everything." Derek shook his head. "No." "What do you mean?" "I almost lost myself." Micah studied him. "I don't understand." Derek's voice lowered. "I built an empire solving pediatric neurological problems, and I almost stayed silent when a kid solved one better than me." Micah didn't know what to say. Derek looked out over the city lights. "You didn't just save my son on that plane." Micah's brow furrowed. "You reminded me why I started." Silence settled between them, soft, earned. Micah finally spoke. "I just didn't want him to hurt." Derek nodded. "That's where it always starts." Months later, portable neural monitors rolled out in community clinics. Maya received updated treatment protocols. Her episodes reduced significantly. Micah stood beside her hospital bed one afternoon as she laughed for the first time without fear of a spike. His mother wiped tears quietly. "You did this," she whispered. Micah shook his head. "No, we did." Across the country, investors cited Urban Neural Systems Initiative as a case study in socially aligned innovation. The merger that once seemed essential faded into irrelevance. One act on a plane, one decision not to stay quiet, one refusal to disqualify someone for being inconvenient. That was the turning point. If this story moved you, if you believe compassion and courage can disrupt power structures, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more cinematic stories like this, and comment "Courage changes everything" below. Because sometimes the most transformative revolutions don't start in boardrooms. They start in moments when someone chooses to speak, and someone else chooses to listen. Caleb slept peacefully that night. No seizures, no spikes, just quiet breathing. And somewhere in Baltimore, a 17-year-old who once rode in the support crew section stood at the center of something much bigger than himself. Not because he chased power, but because he refused to shrink from truth. And that changed everything.